Jerry, you got the whole world waiting. Been ready for you to start the conversation. Your point of view, it got the haters confused. Leave it up to you to bring us all the good news. Positive vibes and the sex appeal too. Dr. Andre Jerry, can I get an interview?
Good evening and welcome to Live with Dr. Andre Jerry, your trusted space for real conversations, practical wisdom, and purpose-driven insight. I'm your host, Dr. Andre Jerry, broadcasting live from San Juan, Puerto Rico. This show is heard in over 128 countries and has featured artists, authors, entertainers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from across the globe. So wherever you're listening into from tonight, on behalf of myself and Artist First Radio, I want to thank you for being part of the conversation, and I want to thank you for your continued support, especially with all these shows getting canceled lately. Have you guys heard about the Sherri Shepherd show and the Kelly Clarkson show being canceled? I caught wind of this earlier this week, and it caught a lot of people off guard, myself included, especially with these two shows because both of the hosts are very, very likable. And they very much have their own lanes. You know, Kelly has all the singing and the inspirational quote energy that she brings to daytime television. You know, sometimes when I watch her show, and I don't watch it often, I sometimes think that I'm watching American Idol. I don't know if I'm watching a karaoke show or a talk show, but she has her own lane, and a lot of people vibe with that. Sherri, of course, she's a comedian. A lot of people think she's funny. I don't particularly think that she's that funny, but I'm always glad to see one of us get their own show. And if you remember back when they were transitioning Wendy Williams out, they had all of these different guest hosts on rotation. Sherri Shepherd was one of the top contenders, along with Bill Bellamy. They had him as a guest host, and Michael Rappaport, the white guy. I think he's a comedian or actor or something, but he actually was really good in that format, the daytime talk show format. But clearly Sherri brought in higher ratings. And I think that's because of her familiarity and her relatability from being a co-host on The View for however long she was on there, six, 7 seasons, something like that. Now, speaking of The View, if you're going to cancel a daytime talk show, that's probably one you want to take a look at, because I get so tired of them on there every single day. It's the same thing. Trump did this. Trump did that. Trump. Is he a horrible person? Yes. Yes, he is. But at what point do you say, okay, he's terrible, but can we talk about something else? You know what I mean? And then they bring on guests on the show who also hate Trump. And so it just turns into this nonstop hate fest. And I'm not going to participate in that. And poor Alyssa, that Republican girl that's on the panel, she's pregnant. Now, I think she got pregnant on purpose just so she can take a maternity leave break from the rest of her co-hosts. I don't even know if she's Republican anymore. They probably converted her. But I just can't with The View. Like I said, if you're going to cancel a show, that's probably one you need to take a serious look at. Not Sherri and not Kelly. Yes, they both can kind of be annoying in their own ways, but really, if you pay attention to them, they both go out of their way to stay out of politics. And like I said, bring their own brand of positivity to daytime television. So, you know, even though both of these shows are technically canceled at the end of this fall, I couldn't help but notice something very interesting. And it was a difference in how Kelly's cancellation was handled versus how Sherri's was handled. And if you think I'm about to make this a racial issue, I am. But just hear me out, and then you decide, okay? Okay, so both shows were canceled, but Kelly was given the opportunity to save face. She got to break the news to her audience herself. And they also allowed her to release a statement saying that she was stepping down as host and she was prioritizing her kids, and she felt it was the necessary and right move for the next chapter, all that stuff, you know, which is fine. Sherri, on the other hand, it felt like Sherri found out her show was canceled the same time we did. And if that's true, that's really messed up. I mean, you can just tell with the media rollout of this, you could tell she was completely caught off guard. Because the very next day after this news broke about her show, she mysteriously caught COVID, and she took a few days off. Now, come on now. We can pretty much all read between the lines and guess what probably happened. They called her into the office on a Monday, dropped this bomb in her lap that her show was being canceled. I'm sure she was probably devastated and confused, probably crying and all of that, asking why. And that's a valid question because the Sherry Show is very well received. It had really great guests. It won an Emmy. It had decent ratings. I'm sure she reminded them of all of this in the boardroom. But none of that mattered because a lot of times there's an agenda behind the scenes that drives these types of decisions. And that applies to the Kelly Show too. But in Sherry's case, I would have appreciated her being given the same courtesy that Kelly was given. You know, the chance to address her audience directly about the cancellation instead of just releasing a press release and having everybody find out on the internet or on entertainment news about her show being canceled. Because the first thing people are going to wonder, especially her supporters and her viewers, is Sherry okay? What happened? You know, how is she taking this? Is she going to be all right? Was she fired? What she's going to do now? You know, all these questions and then the speculation that follows. And all of this could have been avoided by allowing her the dignity of breaking the news herself. So for me, it was like this subtle reminder, something that black folks, we know this all too well. You're still black, honey. You're still black. No matter how high we ascend or how many accolades we have, society has its way, especially in this country, of putting us in our place from their perspective of what our place, our so-called place is. And so we all know what it is. We see it. We might not vocalize it or speak out about it, but we recognize it when we see it, especially when we see it happen to one of our own. We feel it. We internalize it to an extent. As subtle as it may be, sometimes we still clock it. Don't think because we put a smile on our face and we kind of brave through it that we don't feel it. So, no, I don't think Sherry had COVID at all. I think she was blindsided and just needed a moment to herself to kind of get her thoughts, get her bearings before she has to go back and face a live audience again. And see, that's what can sort of happen when you don't have your own platform, when you don't have a production company or an ownership stake like an Oprah or a Tyler Perry. Now, to be fair and to play devil's advocate a little bit, maybe this cancellation had been brewing for a while. Because if you remember, her executive producer, John Murray, the guy that used to walk her up on stage and all that type of stuff every morning, they fired him last year right before this latest season started, season 4. So really there's no telling what might have happened with all of that. But one thing I noticed is that Sherry, you could kind of see her sort of struggle a bit to find her footing ever since John Murray left. Because she made a few little minor tweaks to her format. She started opening the show with these long comedic monologues, basically like 5 minutes of stand-up. She would do 5 minutes of stand-up before she would move to the chair and get to the hot topics. And for me, it just didn't work because Sherry is funny, but Sherry is she's sitcom funny. She's not stand-up funny. You know what I mean? So watching her try to do stand-up on daytime television was kind of painful. And so between that and, you know, she's always was acting so thirsty for every halfway decent man that came on the show, I kind of stopped watching. You know, and I was always quietly rooting for her in the background. And I certainly never expected her show to be canceled. But, yeah, I sort of stopped watching. Now, she did okay with Hot Topics. She did. She wasn't Wendy Williams level because nobody did Hot Topics like Wendy Williams. I kind of miss Wendy. I wish she would come back to media in some capacity, TV, radio, something. But Sherry, she put her own spin on the show. She put her own spin on hot topics, and it worked pretty well for her. Like I said, the ratings were good. She had great support. She won an Emmy. You know, she did her thing. So, Sherry, if you're listening, if you end up, getting a copy of this, you did an outstanding job. You made a lot of people laugh and smile in the mornings. That smile that you have, that beautiful smile, is going to continue to open doors for you. So just keep your head up. All right? And you know what? With all the things that I'm pivoting now, but with all the stuff that I have going on in the background, nothing serious, just, things that come with building and growing and juggling multiple projects. I was going to run a rerun for tonight's episode, but I thought about my audience. I thought about the platform, having respect for my craft. It's Black History Month. People getting canceled left and right. So I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to show up, because the conversations that we have on this show, they matter. And if I'm going to ask you to reflect and grow and stay engaged and accountable to yourself and to your vision, then I've got to hold myself to that same standard. So I'm on today. We're going to get through it. And like I said, plus I'm not trying to get canceled like Sherry and Kelly did. At least let me make it to the 5-year mark in broadcasting first. But, in all seriousness, sometimes episodes like this where we're just sort of drifting and the episodes almost don't happen, those end up being some of the ones that hit the hardest. So we're just going to see what it does, all right? With all of that said, happy Black History Month. I meant to lead with that, but I ended up going on a tangent about Sherry, but y'all know how I am. So I'm going to be honest about something that a lot of Black people would not say out loud, even among ourselves. For most of my life, I've been somewhat, I guess you could say I've been somewhat indifferent about Black History Month. And it's not because I don't value our history or the accomplishments of Black people. I absolutely do. But I don't know, it's like I live in my Black skin every single day. And society makes sure I never forget in its advertisements, in its politics, its policing, just in everyday interactions, not so much here in Puerto Rico, because in Puerto Rico, everybody's basically melanated. So you're not going to get that same type of racial crap that goes on in the States. But pretty much every day when I was in the States, I was constantly reminded that I'm different, and how not only that I'm different, how society as a collective feels about that difference. Do you know what I mean? So for me, there's no novelty in carving out 1 month to, quote unquote, celebrate Black history. It always leaves me kind of wondering, okay, is this month meant for us to celebrate ourselves, or is this for the collective us to acknowledge a history that should have never been ignored in the first place? And that's where it can start to feel a little disingenuous. Because if we're going to be serious about honoring Black history, not just symbolically, but substantively, then this conversation shouldn't stop at just tributes and hashtags and, all the different corporate marketing campaigns that we're seeing. Maybe it should include more honest conversations about formal monetary redress for this country's documented involvement and participation and economic benefit that it got from the transatlantic slave trade and all of the centuries of chattel slavery and the long stretch of legally enforced segregation and Jim Crow laws and all the systemic racism that followed. And yes, I'm talking about reparations, okay? Before anyone rolls their eyes and starts talking about, oh, here go Black folks talking about begging and stuff for reparations, before you even go there, I just want to remind you that there are multiple and well-documented examples where governments have provided financial redress or reparations to groups that were wronged. Okay, and I'm going to give you a few examples because a lot of people don't know this stuff. the Luxembourg Reparations Agreement. This was for Jewish victims of Nazi persecution. It was signed into law back in September of 1952, and it was worth about 3 billion Dutch marks that was paid to Israel over the course of 14 years. And it included an additional 450 million Dutch marks to the claims conference. This was for individual Jewish compensation. Okay, so that's one example. Another one was Swiss Bank's settlement. This was a major Holocaust-era financial redress case. Okay, so they've reached a settlement on this in 1998, not 1888, 1998. And it was formalized in 1999. It was worth about 1.25 billion. It was a class action settlement fund. And like I said, they formally settled on this in 1999. And so, again, this was in response to Holocaust victim. It was assets litigation. It was the whole 9 yards. So those are two prominent examples that were foreign-based. So if your argument is that, hey, that was in another country, we don't really do reparations in the United States, I'm going to give you a couple of more examples that are surrounding the United States, okay? The first one is the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. And this one I just learned about today during some research, but this was where they redressed Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. And again, that's called the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. They paid approximately $20,000 to each surviving eligible internee. Internee is just another word for a political or military prisoner. So this included $20,000 per eligible person. It included a formal apology, and there were tens of thousands of recipients. Payments began in 1990. Okay? One more I'll mention was called the Aleutian and Privilev Island Restitution. It's also called Aleut Restitution Act. This was for indigenous people who were displaced or forced to relocate during World War II. This was $12,000 per eligible individual. And on top of that, they created a restitution fund that included various community benefits. So there are a couple of more examples I can go into, but in essence of time, I'm just going to leave it at those two. So I like to bring those up because a lot of people, they try to frame reparations as some type of radical, unprecedented demand, and it's not that. It's just history simply does not support that argument at all. Because if you think about the examples that I just brought out from overseas and also here in the country, our government as well, they have acknowledged wrongdoing, and they provided financial compensation when harm was clearly documented. Okay, so the fair question to ask is if redress has been considered for other communities who suffered injustices, then why is it a different conversation when we start talking about Black Americans getting reparations? I thought a lot about that today when I was preparing for this show, because if you think about it, we were never really considered humans in the first place. According to the Constitution, we were chattel. We were property. So even if you think about the post from our current president, who recently, put that thing out on the Obamas, making them look like primates and all of that. Even as a former president and first lady of the United States, they're not even immune to this type of stuff. So there's always going to be people who try to seek to put Black people in their so-called place. But as hurtful as that was to see, it says more about him than it does about the Obamas, who to me are the epitome of grace and class, and that's something that I don't think his family could ever aspire to. So I just kind of think that this country has a long way to go in terms of fully reconciling the sordid past that we have with Black America. I think it's always going to be a blight on this country and sort of this unhealed wound unless there's some type of proper redress along the lines of a formal apology or financial reparations. I know it's likely not going to happen under this current administration. It's probably never going to happen at this point. But we just have to sit back and see how things evolve or devolve in this country. And, I'll say this too, and I was thinking a lot about this earlier today. If we actually were to receive reparations or financial redress, it's not as simple as people think it is. Because the reality is that a significant portion of that money, I think, would likely circulate right back into mainstream institutions and other businesses that aren't Black owned. Because there are relatively few Black owned banks or large scale financial institutions. And we also don't consistently support Black owned businesses. Not at the rate that we need to keep wealth circulating within our own communities. I'm trying to walk a delicate tightrope here because I don't want to make it seem like I'm maligning my brothers and sisters. It's just that many other cultural groups have had stronger internal economic ecosystems, where their dollars recirculate multiple times before leaving their communities. And like I said, so that's not about blaming us. It's just about understanding our history. But a lot of generations now, many of our ancestors were just so focused on surviving. And they were intentionally denied access to things like financial education and land ownership opportunities, fair lending practices, the whole 9 yards, equitable tax systems. And wealth building tools that were available to other groups, we were restricted from those through policy and intimidation and a lot of times outright violence. So when we see those gaps exist today in areas like financial literacy and investments, estate planning, a lot of us are getting more knowledgeable about these things. In fact, my good friend Renata, she had 2 guests on her show this past Monday, where they were giving everyone financial literacy information. So a lot of us are starting to get more acclimated to making sure that our wealth is being preserved. But those gaps didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was a long engineered process that happened over the centuries. So I'm just acknowledging the reality of the long-term generational trauma that occurred as a result of chattel slavery and segregation and all of the systemic disparities that are in banking and education, healthcare, the whole 9 yards. And so when you think about that history, it shapes how the Black community sort of trust each other. That's why a lot of us don't patronize other Black businesses. All of that history, it shapes how we collectively handle our money. It shapes how we build or struggle to build a collective economic strength in numbers. So, yeah, sometimes I even found myself thinking that maybe it's a blessing that we haven't received reparations yet. Because unless there's going to be like a widespread economic re-education or infrastructure put in place that teaches us about community investment strategies and all the things, financial literacy, I think a large share of that wealth would just disappear and not do its intended job of creating generational wealth and stability. So it doesn't mean that reparations shouldn't happen. It means that if it does happen, it should be paired with education and policies that will help sustain wealth and not just distribute the wealth. And so that brings me back to Black History Month. When I've said in the past that, sometimes it feels sort of performative, this is part of what I'm talking about. Because too often we highlight the achievements, but we don't fully confront the systems that blocked our progress for so many years. We celebrate the culture, but we don't really address the economic and historical realities that sort of shape the way things are now. So I'll say this. I've recently found myself taking Black History Month a lot more seriously than I have in the past, because we're living in a time where a lot of American history, not just Black history, a lot of American history is kind of being softened and rewritten and reconstructed, or just quietly erased from classrooms, from public discourse. You can't hardly talk about anything now without someone being offended. Or, you know, if you try to tell parts of history that make people uncomfortable, it's a problem. You know, stories that challenge the national myths that a lot of people have, and stories that force us to confront who benefited from things like chattel slavery and who paid the cost, that type of stuff. And that type of erasure it isn't just about the past. It shapes how future generations understand things like justice and cultural identity and truth. So for me, Black History Month isn't so much about celebration as it is about preservation and accountability. And it's about making sure that history, the whole history, doesn't get buried because it makes some people uncomfortable. So something I've been quietly working in the background, I've been spending a lot of time sort of digging into history, not just surface level stuff, sort of the deeper layers, the stories behind the stories, so to speak. And what I kept noticing, and this was over and over again, I kept noticing how many people help shape the moments that we all celebrate, but somehow their names don't always travel with those big moments. Like, we'll hear about the march on Washington, but we don't always hear the names of the strategists who helped to organize it. Or we'll hear about the movement, but not always the minds and the people who built the infrastructure in the background that made that movement possible. And we always talk about cultural shifts and all of that, but there are myriads of people, artists and thinkers, activists, who collectively help to push those agendas forward, sometimes at great personal cost. And so the more I started paying attention to that type of thing, especially in a time when parts of history start to feel like they're being softened or repackaged and edited out, I started feeling the weight of a responsibility, not in a heavy or a preachy way, but in a more personal way, to hold on to these stories just a little bit tighter. And that's something that I've been calling Unforgotten. It's not a big flashy production or anything like that. It's really just me taking some intentional time to highlight some of those overlooked figures, those architects behind all the applause, so to speak, and just try to put their stories back into the broader conversation that we have about Black history and cultural awareness and things like that. Because the truth is, Black history isn't something that begins on February 1st and then on March 1st we just kind of wrap everything up on a nice little bow and move on. It's very layered and it's very ongoing. We're still making history now. And a lot of our old history is still being uncovered, still being re-examined. And we're learning some things that we didn't learn growing up in our history lessons. So a lot of this stuff is still being understood through a more fuller and a more honest lens. So I've been working on these stories all Black History Month. For me, it feels less like a celebration window and more like a sort of just a reminder that preservation, Black history preservation, is an everyday responsibility that should not just fall on a few people's shoulders. So I've been sharing some of these stories online, just little short storytelling pieces here and there. I posted some on my LinkedIn. I've devoted an entire YouTube channel to it. So if you ever feel like examining some of that stuff, you can find it on YouTube. Just look for hashtag Unforgotten, UN, the number 4, GOTTEN, hashtag Unforgotten. Okay, and you'll see the posts I've done in the short-term story pieces that I've posted so far. But, you know, honestly, the bigger purpose with this is not about promotion. Like I said, it's about preservation, because once those stories disappear, the context around them disappears as well. And when the context disappears, it's going to become a lot easier for the truth to disappear right along with it. And you'll have all this revisionist history stuff going on that is in complete contrast to what really and actually happened. So among all the many hats that I wear, I guess we can now add cultural archivist to the list. Okay? And speaking of preservation and storytelling, my other channels are continuing to grow. I have a couple of other YouTube channels that I've been working on. Live with Dr. Andre Jerry, that's where I post, recaps of the show and all types of stuff dealing with cultural media and social media and celebrities and things like that. We recently crossed 2,500 subscribers, and we have well over 500 videos now. So it's growing. It's doing its thing. My other channel, Reality or Truth, that shares Bible-based content, is pushing toward 2,000 subscribers. We also have 500-plus videos in that. And, I've talked about this on the show before, but if you guys haven't started building your own YouTube channel yet, or you have started one and you haven't posted on a while, consider this your sign to get back busy with that. And especially if you have a product or a service, a message, even just a perspective that deserves to be heard, you could be leaving a lot of exposure and opportunity on the table. Because like I mentioned in one of my previous episodes, YouTube is digital real estate. And just like physical real estate, it's going to take early investment and consistency before you start to see things pay off over time. So get out there, carve out your own lane, carve out your own niche, your own corner of the market, using your ideas, your voice, your unique personal brand. And while we're talking about building and evolving, don't be afraid of AI or all of these rapid advancements in technology and stuff that's happening around us, because the world is just changing, and it's changing fast. And if we want to remain relevant and adaptable, we have to evolve alongside all these changes. We got to start moving deeper into this digital age and not get left behind. Can't afford to stay locked in this outdated analog way of operating. We're in a digital age right now. And if AI feels overwhelming for you at this stage where we're at, just start simple. Pick one AI tool, something easy like ChatGPT. That's the one I started with. It's very approachable. You can use it the same way that you use any type of search engine. Just query it, ask it questions. Learn this new terminology that's coming with all this AI stuff. Use ChatGPT to help you understand other AI tools and applications. Because sometimes just learning the language of this new technology and some of the jargon that's being used, that alone will help remove a lot of the fear and suspicion that can creep in when things start to feel like they're moving too fast and changing too fast and all of that. Okay? And once you get comfortable, just branch out and try different AI tools. You got things like Grammarly. That's been around for a while. Meta AI is one of the more newer ones. Gemini. There are a couple of them. But just take advantage of as many free versions as you can and these trial periods that last 30 days, 60 days. The goal isn't to master every single tool. You just want to gain some familiarity with these AI tools and learn how to use them a little bit. It's about adaptability and just keeping your mind engaged with where the world is heading. Now, in terms of building a YouTube channel or, on any platform, it's going to take some time. It's going to take patience. It's definitely going to take some consistency. Okay? Sometimes you post something and it'll just unexpectedly take off, and then you find yourself scrambling, trying to keep up with the momentum of it all. But most of the time, your growth, especially on YouTube, is going to be very steady. And honestly, that's where the real learning happens. And you start to understand and analyze trends, and you start noticing how people think, what they respond to, what holds their attention. And you start to learn how marketing really works. And not from a textbook standpoint, but we're talking about real world application. And over time, you can learn how to shape whatever your message is in a way that will deepen your impact and expand your reach. Because whether you realize it or not, we're living in what many people now call an attention economy. So that gives a whole new meaning to the phrase pay attention. People are literally building careers and businesses and entire industries based on people's ability to capture and hold attention. And honestly, part of the reason why I feel like I've been able to stay on the air for nearly 5 years is because I've been blessed with a gift to engage and connect with and hold space for meaningful conversation. Not because I'm special. That's just a part of the package God gave me. We all came here with something. None of us came here empty-handed. We were all given different gifts and unique talents and perspectives and abilities. And whatever God graced us with, it's designed to help us navigate this earth, navigate our journey, and hopefully help someone else navigate their journey. Some people realize their gifts very early on in life. That wasn't necessarily my walk. I always knew I was a great writer, but some of the other gifts I discovered later in life. So some people never find out what their calling is, or they go their whole lives searching for what their purpose is or what their gifts are. And what I believe part of my assignment is, both on this platform and outside this platform, is helping people to recognize the gifts that are inside them and helping people unlock the best version of their lives, whatever that looks like for them. Okay? So it took me a while to get to that point. I got caught up in career. I got caught up in, salaries and all these different things. But once I started operating in my purpose, everything sort of shifted and changed for me. And so I really want to use my platform to help enlighten as many other people as possible and help them get on the road to finding their true passion, their true purpose, so that they can make their own imprint on this earth. Okay? I want to pause right here and take a quick commercial break, but don't go anywhere, because when we come back, I'm going to share a little bit about what's been going on my end lately. Okay? And we'll talk about some other things, too. You're listening to Live with Dr. Andre Jerry. Stay right there. We'll be back in just a moment.
That's right. At 10 p.m. every second Wednesday on ArtistFirst.com, it's the worldwide internet show, the GL Henderson Radio Hour. Tune in to hear special guests from professionals, live topics, and get a blast from the past with musical legends like Lisa, The Temptations.
I know you want to leave me, but I refuse to let you go.
Manhattans.
Honey, you are my shining star.
Shanice. Shirley Murdoch.
And we slept the night away.
Dana Dane.
To make it interesting, it's me, Dana Dane.
Tina Marie and more. Tune in to the GL Henderson Radio Hour, the king of relationship drama fiction. Every second Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ArtistFirst.com.
Looking for your next car? Amazon Autos has you covered. With just a few clicks, you can shop a wide selection of new vehicles, compare prices, read reviews, and even arrange pickup or delivery, just like ordering anything else on Amazon. It's the future of car buying. Simple, transparent, and all online. Backed by Amazon's trusted network and partnering with local dealerships, Amazon Autos is redefining how we shop for cars. Visit Amazon.com/autos and drive into the future today.
Welcome to another broadcast of Spiritual Concerns, the Deborah Ruffini Show on Artist First Radio Network. We're live from England on Saturdays and Sundays, 3 p.m. New York, 8 p.m. London. All past shows are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. I'll be your host, where issues relating to spiritual matters of concern will be largely examined and discussed. Enjoy the show.
You're back live with Dr. Andre Jerry.
Hey, everybody. All right, welcome back, and thank you for sticking with me through the break. You're tuned in to Live with Dr. Andre Jerry, and we're broadcasting from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And if you're just joining us tonight, we've been having a thoughtful conversation about recognition, redress, or reparations, and how Black History Month lands a little differently for some of us, especially in a time when history itself feels like it's being softened, reframed, or selectively remembered. We also talked about preservation a little bit and about telling the stories behind the stories and about building platforms that help keep those narratives in circulation. Now, before the break, I mentioned I want to give you a brief update on what's been happening in my world lately. Nothing crazy, just life evolving, responsibilities shifting a little bit, and a very full calendar that's keeping me on my toes. And, sometimes it's in those seasons of movement and change that clarity really starts to crystallize. I mentioned on last month's show that I'm going dry this year. And honestly, it hasn't, I told you this before on another episode, but it hasn't been as difficult as I expected it was going to be. In fact, it hasn't been difficult at all. What it has done is increase my clarity. I've dropped a little bit of weight. I don't think people realize how many calories that we drink. But I've lost a little weight. I have a lot more energy. But most notably, I have more money staying in my wallet. I had no clue how much I was just casually spending on alcohol. Even last year, after I cut back to just weekends, when you break it down, $20, $25 a week, it doesn't sound like much. But if you stretch it out over a year and you're looking at, 12 months of spending on just alcohol, and you see where it's $1,200, $1,300, then that's a different, type of feeling when you see those numbers. Now, imagine what I was spending before I cut back. I don't even want to think about it, but I'm going to have to think about it because I'm in the middle of doing my taxes right now. So as I start combing through the bank statements and credit card statements, I'll be getting a very clear picture on where my money was going. And, I can't say I'm looking forward to seeing what those numbers are, but we'll just leave it at that. But either way you slice it, that's a lot of money going out the door towards something that doesn't even improve your health. In many cases, it does exactly the opposite. So that same money, and maybe once I have the tally, I'll share it on another episode, but that money could have been invested or saved or redirected towards something that actually is going to grow and benefit my future. But the biggest takeaway, like I said, for me is that I feel good. I feel really good. I've got more clarity, more energy. And honestly, just a stronger sense of discipline. And of course, having supportive people around you, that makes all the difference. So I'm truly blessed in that regard. Now, here's something I genuinely did not know. Did you know they make non-alcoholic red wine? I know you're probably thinking, yeah, Andre, where have you been? I really did not know they made non-alcoholic wine. I knew about non-alcoholic beer, and I knew about sparkling wine, but I did not know that there was a red wine with the alcohol removed. That's what caught me off guard. But a friend introduced me to this brand called Ariel. They sell premium alcohol-removed wine. So far, I've tried the Cabernet. It's really interesting. It tastes like wine, just softer, less sharp, has a less sharp taste to it. We use it to make sangria over here. And, of course, they sell sparkling and white wine versions, too. This isn't a paid advertisement or anything. Not yet, anyway. I'll pursue it. But I'm just sharing what I've been sort of experimenting with in this dry season that I'm in. And, it actually would make a thoughtful gift. If you're, say you're invited to someone's house and you're going to bring something, that would be the perfect gift to bring. Because there's always someone at a party or a gathering who doesn't drink. And I never thought I would be that person. But, yeah, I'm that person. Oh, I don't drink. So I'm the weirdo that's going to be ordering mocktails and non-alcoholic drinks and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's called Ariel. If you try it, let me know what you think. I'm very curious to hear your perspective about how you think it tastes. You can always reach me at my email. It's livewithdrandrejerry@gmail.com. Okay. Okay, it's a little later than I thought it was. Okay, so look, so before we wrap up tonight, I want to share something a little different. Now, on the surface, this is going to feel like it's a left turn from everything that we talked about tonight. We talked about history. We talked about recognition. We talked about reparations, personal growth, discipline, the preservation of stories. That's really important to me right now. But in many ways, what I'm about to share is actually connected to all of it in a weird way. Because at the end of the day, so much of what we experience in the world is shaped by perception, okay? What we carry internally, it's how we interpret the people and situations that show up in our lives. And so I've been doing a lot of meditating and reflecting lately, not just on history, but a whole bunch of stuff, human behavior, including my own behavior. And that reflection inspired this poem that I was working on yesterday and today. I want to share this poem with you. And don't laugh at the title. Just absorb it and send me an email about what you think. The title of this poem is called The Bitch, the Bastard, and the Dog. Okay? All right. The bitch, the bastard, and the dog. It's about that one family that lives among us all. You could say they're loud, obnoxious, maybe even rude. One encounter with them is enough to shape your mood. It's like they live in their own world or somewhere deep in the woods. Being thoughtful neighbors was never quite understood. Every morning while the sun is still rising, they stage their daily parade, bouncing balls, barking dogs, sharp commands that ricochet. The dog barks at nothing. The bastard yells at the dog. The bitch shouts at the bastard, and the noise hangs heavy in the fog. Windows rattle, coffee spills, patience thins and tempers flare. You whisper to yourself, how do people live like this without a single care? You rehearse speeches in your head. You draft complaints you'll never send. You judge, you sigh, you shake your head. You hope the madness ends. But then something shifts. A quiet of thought begins to rise. Above the barking, above the blame, a whisper that feels almost cruel because it says their name and yours in the very same sentence. What if they're not random, not accidents in your space? What if every irritation is a reflection wearing a different face? The noise you claim you cannot stand, the chaos you despise, what if it's the echo of the unrest you've internalized? The dog that won't stop barking, is that the voice inside your mind? The bastard always shouting, is that the anger left unrefined? The bitch who stirs the conflict, is that judgment you disguise as righteous indignation behind civilized replies? And suddenly, the volume lowers, because when you recognize that every person you encounter is a projection of your own interior skies, aspects of your thinking, fragments of your view, you lose the need to battle what is merely mirroring you. The bitch, the bastard, and the dog are not just a family across the lawn. They are the noise in your awareness, the habits you outgrew, the shadow you've been fighting without realizing it was you. They're us, they're me, and they're you. And once you truly see it, the anger dissolves, the frustration softens, the war quietly resolves, because you cannot be at war with reflection and expect to win. I want to thank you for spending time with me tonight. If you heard something that made you think, reflect, question, or even see something in yourself a little differently, then tonight's conversation that almost didn't happen did exactly what it was supposed to do. Remember, growth isn't always comfortable. Awareness isn't always convenient, but both are necessary if we're going to be serious about becoming better people, individually and collectively. I'm Dr. Andre Jerry. You've been listening to Live with Dr. Andre Jerry. Thank you so much for spending time with me this evening. Good night, everybody.